Here it is, people. Happy new season. The Premiership returns tonight and I cannot wait. Welcome back to the channel. The return of the Gallagher Premiership, the opening weekend. My thoughts ahead of the new season is what I'm going to be covering in this video. So drop a comment down below on anything I touch upon, really. Anything Gallagher Premiership related. Who do you think is going to win it? Who should be favourites? What do you make of all the various different teams? How do you think your club is going to get on? Whack it in the comments section. Whilst you're here as well, like the video and subscribe to the channel. The first thing I want to say is I love the fact that we've had a proper off-season. I love the fact that there's been quite a big break between the end of last season and the start of this season, because I'm a massive subscriber to the belief that less is more. And over the last few years, in particular, if you look at the end of the season that led into World Cup warm-ups, the World Cup, and then we were back, there was basically pretty much no break. There was technically maybe a few weeks there, but it's been pretty constant. And I think the fact that we've had a proper off-season just meant I feel so much more excited about this. I really believe less is more. I know some of you, if you're used to being season ticket holders or at your club every other week or every week going home and away, then it's a massive thing to lose from your routine. But I think sometimes it's nice to have a break and then get really excited about going again. So that's one of the things that I really appreciate from the summer we've just had. And something else to keep an eye on in the opening week of the season is style. What style of rugby are we going to see implemented from the various different teams? Because I know in pre-season, both Sarens and Gloucester have spoken a lot about their attack, playing a different kind of game plan. Sarries have spoken about that a fair bit. Gloucester, I think, have focused on that in that they just weren't effective enough last season where they really struggled. So what do their attacks look like? And Newcastle as well, perhaps less so much about expanding. I'm going to get onto them in just a moment towards the end of the video, because I think the Falcons are quite an interesting case in terms of where are they off the back of a really disappointing campaign. But the style of a few different teams is something 100% to keep an eye on. But let's start off with the winners from last year, Northampton Saints. What an unbelievable run to that Premiership final and to that victory. And the big question for me really is this the start of a Northampton Saints dynasty? It's something I said after the final at Twickenham all those months ago. The best teams in the history of English club rugby have been a dynasty. They have won multiple things. Is this the start of that for the Saints? Now, it's not going to be easy for them. They have lost a lot of experience from that team. When you look at Waller, Ludlam and Laws, that is a lot of quality and a lot of experience. Now, they've still got guys like Furbank and Freeman, Finn Smith, Alex Mitchell. That's the kind of focus on the ones in the back line. They still have leaders in that team, but there is a leadership void. Now, I would expect those guys that have come through the academy to be able to step up and continue leading that team. I think that's the only thing for me at the moment on the eve of the new season from a Northampton perspective of how do they deal with that. I think that's the big challenge facing them as we sit here ready for game week 1. Is this the start of a Saints dynasty? It's a big question. In terms of the others from the top 4, we've got Bath, Saracens and Sale. Now, Bath are intriguing. I've heard quite a few people say that Bath should be the favourites because of the quality of squad they have. They were so close, one phase of play, one score away from pipping Saints in that final at Twickenham, despite the fact they had a man sent off relatively early in the game. So therefore, they should be favourites this year. What do you make of that? I actually don't quite agree with it. And I'll explain why when I get onto Sale in just a second. In fact, let's do Sale now. Why not? The reason I don't think Bath are favourites is because it's been one season and it was a great season for them. But Bath for years were a team that underachieved based upon the quality of squad that you looked at. You looked at them on paper and they should have always been a top 4 team, and they so rarely were. So off the back of one season, I'm not quite ready to say that they're favourites. Sale, on the other hand, is their window for their opportunity to win something closing. In the last year, they were semi-finalists, dragged themselves into the top 4 at the end of the season. They were runners-up the year before losing to Saracens. I think they were 6th the year before that, so a bit of a down year. But they were semi-finalists again the year before that. What I mean is, they've been consistent. They have been there or thereabouts getting themselves in the mix. At some point, you have to take their shot. So I almost look at a team like Sale with more expectation than I do a team like Bath. But let me know what you make of that. Maybe you're like a lot of the people I've heard this past week saying that Bath are their favourites. As for Saracens, Similarly to Saints, you have to look at the players that aren't there anymore. It is the post-Farrell and post-Vunipola brothers era. Players that were so crucial to the club when they were at their absolute pomp, winning Premiership titles and winning European Cups. So what do they look like? Ben Earl has spoken about, and I mentioned it already, their game plan, their style looking a little bit different. So I'm intrigued to see what he means by that. But who steps up to lead the team? Again, you've got characters there that will. Earl, for example, is a great example. I think he will relish it almost. He is just improving as a player, developing as well. I think he will be a massive leader in that team. But those are significant players, in particular Farrell, in terms of running the attack that they have lost. So what do Saracens look like? Below the top four, you've got Bristol, Exeter, Harlequins, Leicester. And I suppose the really intriguing thing for me when you look at those teams is there is going to be movement there, but who is it? Bristol towards the end of last season, probably over the last 4 or 5 rounds of the season, were the form team in the league. They just couldn't quite drag themselves into the playoff mix. They had a bad defeat to Saracens, which ultimately was their undoing. So do they continue along that trajectory? Exeter are in the second year of their rebuild, I suppose. All those, basically, they were basically uni students. All those inexperienced players last year who performed above expectations, a year older, a year wiser, with more experience, are they the team to kick on? Harlequins were a funny team last year because I actually thought in the Premiership they were pretty disappointing. They won 9, they lost 9. They conceded a lot of points, but they've got a new defence coach. Remember the impact that Northampton had when appointing a new defence coach last year. It fixed the final part of their game. It saw them to that Premiership title. So what impact does that have for Harlequins? But also, I say their Premiership season last year wasn't good. They had an unbelievable run in the Champions Cup. So you feel like it is there. It's just if they can have the consistency domestically to be able to get themselves back in the mix. And then Leicester with Michael Checker, who has quite a job on his hands, I think. But in terms of a force of personality and experience and quality as a coach, you could see Leicester make massive strides this year. So I think all 4 of those teams that I've mentioned, you could make a good case for them improving this year and putting themselves in the mix. The problem is, some of them have to be disappointed. Like if you had to do a prediction of 1 to 10 placings in the Premiership, you will end up putting a team in there, I don't know, a Bristol, an Exeter, a Quins, a Leicester. You will end up putting a team like that 7th or 8th, even though it is incredibly plausible that they're in the top 4 as well. It is so tight. It was so tight last year. I think it is going to be the same again this year. But out of those teams, who do you see having the most movement? Call me biased as a Bristol fan. I was really encouraged by how they finished last year. I'm hoping, expecting, keeping my fingers crossed that they will continue in the same vein and become a top 4 team again. But I would imagine fans of those other 3 sides will be saying exactly the same. So we'll see. Obviously, you've got Gloucester there as well. I haven't mentioned them much. I'll be honest, for me with Gloucester, I genuinely want it to work out for the club. They're a brilliant club, brilliant fan base. I like George Skivington. I think he's a decent coach. I think he's a good bloke. But I'm in the territory of I will believe it when I see it. Gloucester are basically never in the top 4, are they? In recent history. Like, they're just not there. And for a club of that history, that is a massive shame. But that's why, for me, I'll believe it when I see it. I want to finish off on Newcastle, though. I was up at Kingston Park on Monday. And a big question for me heading up to the North East was, will Newcastle be competitive this year in the Premiership? Last season, played 18, lost 18. Massively disappointing campaign. And coming away from Kingston Park, look, they're still going to be around the bottom of the league. But can they give a few teams a bloody nose? And I speak about style and game plan at the start of the video. What they mentioned up there was narrow and deep. So essentially, I think, quite a narrow game plan. They're not going to be too expansive. They're not going to do anything too complicated. But what they will do is they will do it well. And with Steve Diamond at the helm, he's been there and done it before. He has taken on these sorts of projects with Sale. When he was at Saracens, it wasn't the Saracens that we now know as multiple trophy winners. If you want anyone in charge for this sort of project, it is him. So I hope and I feel Newcastle will be more competitive. We need them to be for the league. And actually, they seemed pretty confident that they wouldn't be in a playoff for promotion relegation. Obviously, presuming that whoever wins the championship fits the criteria for a playoff in the first place. I really, really hope, for me, I want one of the stories of the season to be the improvements at Newcastle. They need to get Kingston Park on a Friday being that horrible, hostile place to go again. Somewhere teams didn't want to travel up on a Friday night. They've got a Friday game today against Bristol. Let's see how they get on. Obviously, I hope Bristol win. But in terms of the season, I hope we see a much improved, much better Newcastle team. I think we will see them be more competitive. So here we go. Gear up for the Premiership. Brilliant domestic league. It is back. Put your comments down below on anything really, on your team, anything I touched upon, who you think favourites are. Let me know. Like the video and subscribe to the channel whilst you're here as well. And I'll see you in the next one.